Yeah, you wouldn't want to live in a society where everybody's dishonest, where everybody lies all the time, where you can't take anybody's word. How could you make a contract with anybody? It would be absolute chaos. A principle, or having principle, means there are things you've decided that are just so obviously true that you want to stick by them, you want to live by them, you want to preach and practice them because they are that solid. They say, well, I think I should be free to sell my house for whatever price I can get, but that guy over there, no, he will gouge me. We have to control him.
Larry, hello. I am speaking to Lawrence Reed, the former president of Foundation of Economical Education in the United States. He's a very big friend of Poles and Poland, and he's a freedom fighter. Hello, Larry.
Hello, Jan. How are you?
Yeah, no, very good. But I have very, essential question to discuss with you today.
Oh. Okay.
So figure out that I was hired in some extent by Liberty International and the Language of Liberty Institute run by Glenn Kripe. And I went to Nepal to be a lecturer in Liberty camps and figure out that I saw that the young people, it seems that around all the world, they are as tabula rasa as far as freedom issues are concerned, about free market. They ask me, I have an employee from Kazakhstan, a young guy, 19 years old. He's a very smart guy. He speaks Russian, he speaks Kazakhs, he speaks English in a very good level, and he speaks Polish also. We can communicate in Polish. So, and this guy is a programmer and a quite good programmer. And I start, to talk to him, and I ask him, do you know what does it mean free market? And he said, no, what does it mean free market? So my question, essential, as a let's say professor, maybe teacher, how can we deal with the youngsters? How can we provide, and what should we provide to them, and in what way to enter them into this world of freedom, understanding freedom philosophy?
Okay, that's a great question, Jan, and I've given that a lot of thought over the years. Are you thinking of what age group? Let's say ages
17, 18, 19,
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's within the framework of the work of the Foundation for Economic Education. So we have on the FEE website, fee.org, some free videos, free online courses, as well as daily fresh commentary videos and so forth that might be very helpful. But here's an idea you might think is a little strange, but if you have the time and you're with a group of young people and as you say, they're completely tabula rasa, you're starting from scratch. The first thing I think I would do is I would have them watch a movie called Antz, A-N-T-Z. Have you ever seen it?
No.
It came out in the 1990s, and it's an animated film. But I have to tell you, when I went to the theater to see it, it was the only movie that I ever felt compelled to pull out any bits of paper, business cards that I had to take notes on as I watched the movie, because there were so many great lines. And the reason it's a great way to introduce young people to ideas of freedom and free markets is it focuses on a colony of ants. And as you might imagine, all the ants, except for one, do exactly as they're told by the top ants, and they're told to be the same. You know, nobody's any different from anybody else. And of course, the ants at the top who are giving the orders, it turns out they are very individualistic themselves. I mean, they love power, you know, they love giving orders to the entire colony. Well, the hero of the movie is a single ant. He goes by the name of Z. That's why the name of the movie has a Z at the end instead of an S, A-N-T-Z. He turns out to be the hero of the movie because right from the beginning, he doesn't want to follow orders. He feels like, hey, I'm my own self. I want to do things. I want to see things. I have my own projects and ambitions and so forth. And of course, he gets all kinds of pressure from the other ants to just sort of blend in, not to be any different. Well, in the end, when the ant colony faces a threat from outside, it ends up being saved by this one ant who takes initiative that the others will not, because they just do what they're told. And so the lesson of that movie is strongly individualistic. And I've always thought that that's a great way to introduce students. You have them watch that movie. I think you could get it free on YouTube, probably. And then you ask them, now, when you watch the movie, think about the lessons that it is teaching, because we're going to discuss it afterwards. And then immediately afterwards, you have a discussion, and you will find that students will appreciate the fact that the message is strongly individualist. And then that gives you an opportunity to discuss, well, what's the difference between a society that is individualistic and a society that is collectivist? And what should we do with people who don't want to follow orders, who have their own plans, but are otherwise very peaceful people? Well, the students, you know, they will not say, oh, we should give him orders. We should tell him what to do. He should be just like everybody else. I mean, I think students are naturally very individualistic, and they're also very rebellious. I mean, weren't we in our teenage
years?
It's
age.
We're like rebels. Well, we need to play on that, because Z in the movie rebels against the collective and ends up being the hero. So that's just another thought. I think if you ever have that kind of time, it's probably an 1.5-hour movie, or just recommended verbally, even if you don't have the students assembled in some hall, ask them to watch it and then engage in some kind of discussion afterwards. It's a great way. And then from there, you can go on to say, well, what are some of the collectivist societies in recent history that we should look at? Well, there's Cambodia under Pol Pot. There's the old Soviet Union. You know, places that said, you do what you are told, don't be individualistic. Everything should be for the greater good. What actually happens in those societies?
Okay.
And yeah, so that's a great way, I think, to.
So it's a very beginning. So to show individualism, okay, and yeah. So that so it's better to create the team of different people who cooperate in a good way than the people of equal people who everybody is the same. Okay, so as a beginning, I can agree. Of course, I should see this movie, and maybe we can then establish some didactical advices and didactical tips for professors, you know, and some kind of exercises. And what is the next as a issue? The issue of liberty, or issue of free market, or issue of government? Because when I was in Nepal, I saw that the youngsters, they believe that government, it's something given as parents, you know, so we should obey because they are parents, so they care about us. And I just, you know, change their minds that the government, it's not a given thing. It should be elected. Let's imagine, so I created a small group of 6 people, and I said, okay, now we have a problems. When let's enlist the problems we have to resolve, and then we will choose the right people to resolve this in our behalf. And then I started to ask, okay, how can we collect money? So they saw that the money should be collected from us. And, you know, within 15 minutes, it turned their perception of government, and they started to talk completely different, because at the very beginning, they talked, government should do this, should take care about this, should provide this, etc., etc. Okay. Yes. And then they completely, you know, they change their minds.
Yeah. Well, there are a couple ways, maybe more than a couple, but a couple that I've used quite frequently. When I used to teach at Northwood University in Michigan, I had incoming freshmen, many of whom were just as you described, brand new to these ideas, never heard them or heard very little about free market ideas before. And one of the first lectures I gave, and I saw a lot of lights go off in people's heads, was parallels between the course of ancient Rome and modern society, America in particular. And I would talk about how the Romans started out just like America did, as a rebellion against kings. They established a republic. They dispersed authority. They created elective bodies. They had a respect for tradition and for unanimity whenever it was achievable. You know, some of the common values that brought the Roman Republic together. And then I spent more time talking about how they lost it. They discovered the state as a source of income, not just a source of protection and safety, but a source of goodies. You can vote yourself a living instead of just working for one. And I talked about how that led to a very costly welfare warfare state. And ultimately, Romans lost their freedom and their existence to concentrated power and finally barbarians from abroad. Well, the reaction from my students was like, wow, I never heard this before. It sounds like what we're doing today. We should learn from that. Well, then I had them, because then they wanted to know what's the alternative, and we don't want to do that. So that was a very helpful way to bring them to these ideas. Another one, and I probably use this more often than anything, and that is an emphasis on personal character. Even before I get to a discussion of government and what role it should play, I find it very useful to try to find common ground on what are the personal values that you think make for not only your individual success, but the success of your society. What are those? And I would help the students along a little bit. I'd suggest, well, what about honesty? And, you know, it doesn't take very long before you convince them that, yeah, you wouldn't want to live in a society where everybody's dishonest, where everybody lies all the time, where you can't take anybody's word. How could you make a contract with anybody? It would be absolute chaos. So you want a society that values truth and honesty. And another is intellectual humility. And this is where I would introduce Leonard Read's I Pencil. Yeah. And have them say, yeah, and say, well, what's the lesson of I Pencil? There are a lot of lessons there, but one of them is, don't get it in your head that you are so smart that you can run the lives of other people. You don't even know how to make a pencil. Yeah. And, you know, that's just eye-opening for them. And then other personal character virtues like responsibility. You try to get them to think, well, what would it be like to live in a society that is not responsible, where everybody's irresponsible? Well, that too would be chaos. You'd have people saying, oh, don't blame me, even though it's my fault. It's your fault. Or give me something. I'm entitled. You know, I mean, that's what an irresponsible society would look like. Who wants to live in that? Nobody, when you think about it. Mm-hmm. Well, there are other character virtues you can talk about besides responsibility. You can talk about courage. You can talk about gratitude, being thankful. If you explain that attribute to people, they begin to understand, not everything that's good that's happened to me is my own doing. Other people have done some wonderful things, like producing a high standard of living that I can take advantage of. I should be grateful for that. I shouldn't be thinking of them as evil or as avaricious. I should be saying, hey, thanks, Bill Gates, for giving us Microsoft. That, you know, instead of this victim ideology that you see on the left. Well, then if you can agree with students on what the important character virtues are, you just start applying those then to what is the proper role of government. Do you want a government that lies to you? The government that tells you what to do, that thinks it knows everything? Do you want a government? How much sense does that make? Do you want a government that's irresponsible, that spends more than it has and sends the bill to the next generation? You sort of, the more you talk about character, the more you're led automatically to principles of small government and big people.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so we have individualism and the role of government, and what is the next topic?
Well, then I think you can explain to young people the importance of principle.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean to be a principled person? Because you've just explained some things that can become very important principles in their lives, and you hope they will. But you kind of bring it together by saying, you know, a principle or having principle means there are things you've decided that are just so obviously true that you want to stick by them, you want to live by them, you want to preach and practice them because they are that solid, okay? And you can point, that may sound self-evident, but I can tell you, there are lots of people who live their lives and couldn't tell you what their principles are. They've never, yeah. And they hold contradictory principles. They say, well, I think I should be free to sell my house for whatever price I can get. But that guy over there, no, he will gouge me. We have to control him, you know. So I would stress the importance of living your life according to some rock solid principles. Do you remember Groucho Marx, the old comedian?
Yeah. The who didn't speak. Yeah. Yeah. So his brother. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, he was in one of his movies. He was the head of a fictional country, and he's kind of a charlatan, and he's speaking to a group of people, and he says, "Those are my principles. If you don't like them, I have others." Which is kind of like saying, I really don't have any principles. I'll tell you one thing, I'll tell another audience something different. Or I'll have whatever principles you want me to have, but I'm not reliable. I'll change them at the drop of a hat. So get the students to recognize how important it is to decide what's important to them as principles and stick with them.
Yeah. Okay. Can you provide, we have maybe 5 minutes more. So as you know, for the end to our talk, this first part, can you provide a bunch of those principles you can advise to the people?
Yes, in fact, let me since our time is limited, I'll tell you what, I will. No, since this is being recorded, I better tell you. Yeah. I have compiled 7 of them in something called 7 Principles of Sound Policy. And people can see those if they go either to the FEE.org website, and in the search engine type in 7 Principles, read my last name. I think they will find it both in video and in a written version. They aren't the only 7, but there's 7 very important principles that almost everybody will agree with.
Okay, so we will add, let's, for the time being, to finish this first part of our talk, I will also contact my brother in speech marks, Barun Mitra from India. Yeah, from India. Right. He's from India, and we will discuss all these issues. So I would like to continue to talk about this. Maybe in 1 month we can continue, because we have to work on this material. Okay. So thank you very much for picking up my idea to talk about didactic, how to teach youngsters and how to provide them their knowledge. Because, I think that, now observing the war between Ukraine and Russia, I can see that it's also the war between free people and the slaves from the Russian side. So the prisoners of war, they receive orders and they, perform these orders. But in the Ukrainian side, it's, people who know what they are fighting for. Yes. So Larry, thank you very much. We will continue for sure this very important topic. And bye, next time.
Okay, thank you, Jan. I enjoyed it very much.